morning, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. I'm glad a lot of people seemed to enjoy the stream last night. It was very busy on the chat, which I loved, even though it was kind of wacky at times. It's fine though. But also, we had a few subscribers from that. I appreciate all of you that did that. Also need more people watching and more people subbing so that way we can get the word out about these warnings. So definitely smash that like button, shred the subscribe button, and face melt the share button so that way we can get more people on here and get this warning out. A lot of people weren't streaming till a little bit later, but storms were already firing by this point. So we want to make sure that we're on top of the game here. And there were also times where tornado warnings were coming in very slowly. So that's why it's important to have some of these YouTube live streamers that do weather. Getting that word out is going to be extremely important down the line because we have a very active stretch of weather coming here. 4 out of the next 5 days actually have slight risk attached to them right now. The only day that doesn't out of the 5 is Wednesday, and I do think that is likely prone to changing based off parameters that I've seen. That being said here, let's take a quick review at what we saw yesterday. 13 tornado reports so far, 112 hail reports, 25 of which were significant, and then 44 wind reports. A lot of activity, especially over towards Missouri and Texas in particular. That's where our enhanced risk region was here, and then where our slight risk was over here towards the Iowa-Missouri line here. We can expect more severe weather in this exact same area today. Another thing to note that even if you aren't in a slight or enhanced risk or greater threat area, tornadoes still can occur. Because if we look at the convective outlook from yesterday, then you can clearly see that both Minnesota, parts of central Nebraska, and South Dakota were not in any sort of risk, not even a marginal. And look what we have here. We have several tornado reports. One that was not too far away from Hastings. We have another one over here towards western South Dakota, and several reports over here between the Minnesota and South Dakota lines. Like I said, general thunderstorm risk. So do not let your guard down just because you're in a level 1. It doesn't mean severe weather can't happen. It's just the confidence of it happening is a lot lower than being in this yellow or orange area. So that being said, this is what we have for today. We have an enhanced risk over the exact same area where we had tornadoes yesterday. All 3 hazards are in play yet again today, and then we have basically flip-flopped here. Whereas yesterday the enhanced risk was over towards Texas, mainly for hail. Now we've switched over and had gotten a slight risk attached to that. The threat's pretty much the same across this region. Tornado threat's low, but it's not zero. So again, make sure that you are watching the weather down here in Texas as well. Damaging winds are a notable threat there as well. So again, do not let your guard down. And then, of course, we see this marginal risk over here towards South Dakota and North Dakota, and maybe even as far back as Wyoming and even parts of Montana. Just as I mentioned before, you need to be staying weather aware. Just because it's a level 1 doesn't mean anything can't happen. So let's go ahead and actually get a look at the hazards here. The tornado threat is, of course, greatest over here towards Iowa and parts of Missouri. The tornado threat is migrating slightly to the north. But this could very well change because we were seeing a lot of changes with this last forecast all the way up until the day up. So it's easy to say that can't happen again. That being said, we look at damaging wind potential. That's the greatest threat in my opinion today, as we could be expecting a potential bow echo beginning to develop later this evening and maybe even into the overnight. Not to say that can't happen over here towards Texas, as we do have a hatch risk area as well, which also means we could see up to 70+ mile per hour winds. Over here, my real concern with this area here, there's the threat of maybe even hurricane force wind gusts with this line of storms. We'll get into the parameters in just a minute. This could be a lengthy video just for today alone. And then, of course, there's the hail threat, which is pretty organized in both areas. We're getting towards the time of year where hailstones are going to start to become a lot bigger over these regions. We're getting the lapse rates that you would look for. Just thankfully, the kinematics aren't in play, per se, because if they were, I would be very concerned about the threat of tornadoes. These would be long-track tornadoes. So if there's anything to be thankful for, any positives in this, that will be it. That being said, that's what we have going on for today's severe weather threat. At some point, either before the stream, I'm going to start working on the video for tomorrow morning. It might just be something that I put together early this afternoon to cover the upcoming days, because it's pretty active and it may be tough to upload videos for the next few days. That being said here, let's go ahead and get into things here. I'm going to start out by looking at the temperatures. We have an abundant warm sector, and a very stout warm sector at that, that's beginning to take shape here. If I can get this to go here. But here we are. Look what happens as we get into the afternoon hours across this region. Abundant 80, 90 degree plus temperatures here. Very warm and unstable atmosphere across this region. And the unique thing about this setup, based off of the positioning of this map here, we actually have to look at this from two different perspectives here. This is towards the Midwest and from two different points here. So we need to be watching towards Illinois. We need to be watching towards parts of Nebraska today, and even parts of Kansas. So basically, I'm going to be switching back and forth between these 2 points, but either way, the story is all the same. This is the warm front that's been draped out across this region here. I'm going to actually try and draw this out. But basically, this is where our warm front is. I know it's not the best line you've ever seen, but all of this right here pretty much is our warm sector. Abundant across really the entire middle and even eastern half of the country here. Towards where I live, I'm even going to be heading towards 80s. This is around Atlanta. This is where I live. 84 degrees today. So it's going to be a hot one for a lot of us here. That being said, we go forward here, and these temperatures linger into the evening. Prime time for severe weather. So if there's any sort of moist sector that develops with this, it's going to lead to a very unstable atmosphere. And this even persists into Monday. Again, we're going to get into Monday's threat tomorrow, which is actually going to be centered across the Midwest right here as well. Like I said, it's going to be a lot to cover over the next few days. So now we're switching back and forth with this. We're going to be going to the dew points next. And this is where things become more concerning. Not only do we get sufficient dew points, they're very rich dew points at that. We have widespread 60 degree plus dew points. And you can even see a little point here where we get a couple of 70 degree dew points. And right around the evening hours and overnight, where you would think, okay, maybe this is going to start to taper off here. Look what starts to happen here. You almost get a secondary surge here. There's no dry line with this. There's no really well-established dry line behind this. So these storms are these storm environments that we're in right now, they're going to be just ramping right back up once again through Monday and even through Tuesday. On Monday in particular, take a look at this little swath here where we're getting these 70-plus degree dew points. Normally, you don't see them this far north. Normally, Gulf moisture doesn't advect this far north, but that's another. What actually is happening there is, well, you're going to find it hard to believe, but there's a term in the weather world, corn sweat. Some of you who live in this region might have heard of this, but the corn sweat can increase the relative humidity and the dew points. That's a whole nother video to talk about in and of itself. I'm kind of nerding out a bit. Like I said, I love doing this, so there we go. But that being said here, the dew points over this region over the next several days are going to be ridiculous. And like I said, there's just an open season when it comes to dew points here, which is a key factor in severe weather. You got to have that moisture in abundance in order to really get anywhere. And this persists further off to the east as well. So I got to switch this over. But that being said, man, look at this. Getting to the afternoon hours, those intense dew points make their way even as far north as Illinois here. This could also be Gulf moisture too, though, because we're starting to get away from some of the corn. But look at that, man. That moisture is just abundant. It's everywhere. And even as we get into the later hours of Monday, we're still getting those 60-plus degree dew points, even above 65 for a lot of regions here. So, man, it's going to be an active week. So just buckle up. That's all I'm going to say there. That being said, continuing to switch back and forth here. Another concern I have also with the fact that there are these dew points and such parameter here, and plenty of energy in the atmosphere is a threat for flooding. I'm actually going to go ahead and talk about that really quickly. Towards the end, we'll actually take a look at the potential totals we could get. But I do see the slight risk from the Weather Prediction Center. I do think this will probably be stretched out a bit here, probably a little later this afternoon. And I'm not ruling out the potential for a moderate risk here where we could see a 40% chance of excessive rainfall here, basically flash flooding potential. The thing about this is these storms are also going to be moving so quickly that the totals may not accumulate as much as I may think, but this area has been getting hit with storms a little bit more frequently over the last few days, and with that heavy rainfall, the concern for flash flooding definitely exists, especially in my eyes. So that being said, let's make sure that we're taking our proper flooding precautions as well over this region. Another thing to note here is we need to take a look at the Cape here. So this is convective available potential energy. This is basically a gauge of just how much energy is, or how much instability is available in the atmosphere. And we're going to see that in notable abundance already in the morning. If there wasn't a capping inversion in place with this, there will be storms already going off by this point. But look what happens as we get towards the early afternoon hours here. 2,000 to 3,000 joules per kilogram already. Maybe even a couple of pockets here where we could be sneaking towards 4,000 here. This is over toward, I'd actually know one of my admins over here that you'll be seeing on the live stream later today has an increased potential of severe. He's got an area where we're looking at maybe 3,800 plus joules per kilogram. Kinematics aren't that impressive with this, but he's going to get some intense storms nonetheless, and also there's a couple analogs for significant hail with that, so that has to be watched really close. Greatest tornado threat is going to be over here on the fringe of that warm front, again, just like yesterday. And look at that. You don't have to go far and look for the tornado threat. There it is right there. Low-level jet is looking pretty impressive over here towards Iowa. And again, look at the dew points, almost 65, 80-degree temperatures. Doesn't really have a big supercellular look to it, though. I'm going to make sure I actually download this and share this with the guys in Discord. That being said, though, let's go ahead and roll forward here. And that cape is persistent, too. It does not go away quickly. It's not until Monday, just about Monday afternoon, where it starts to go away. But look what happens once again. It's back. Like I said, just so much instability available, so much moisture, just parameters in abundance with the exception of wind shear. And it's not like, and even then, it was a low wind shear environment yesterday and last night. And yet we were still able to get some significant tornadoes, in fact, over here towards northern Missouri. So it's not like we can't get tornadoes because of the lack of wind shear. So again, any of these areas that are within the slight or enhanced risk today, definitely be on the lookout. Because again, threat isn't zero. So here we are looking a little further off to the west now. And again, Cape is really impressive. Over here, the storms might fire earlier in the day and we could get a second round a little bit later. But look how much Cape there is available already at this point. This is in the early morning hours here, and we could still see severe with this. In fact, this is over 5,500 joules per kilogram at the surface. We're looking at mixed layer, so we're still looking at 4,400 joules per kilograms. But simply put, in a normal severe situation, you almost would expect the surface Cape to be a little bit higher than the mixed layer. Interesting thing to note here is the negative storm relative velocity here, or storm relative helicity, excuse me. I don't know why I called it velocity, but I do find that interesting. But nonetheless, severe is still possible. Plenty of D-Cape available, so there's damaging wind potential with that. So again, a lot of stuff to keep note of here, and even then there's plenty of loose analog matches of hail too. So over towards Illinois today, and even parts of Indiana, we're going to have to watch you. early for the threat of severe weather. I probably won't be going live for that one because I got to prepare for today's live here. If it gets significant enough, we may see what happens. But here's the other reason why the concern for severe weather exists later into the evening. That cape hangs around, and by the time that squall line and most likely what will probably end up being a bow echo takes shape here, from the looks of it, it's going to persist. It's going to be in an environment where it can thrive for a while. When you have instability like that, you can get storms firing on top of each other, and given the environment here, these will persist. As long as it has a good moisture source, which it has plenty of around here, and a point of lift, which it does as the low pressure is moving further to the north here, it's going to be very interesting to see how things develop with this. That being said here, we can go ahead and look at the bulk shear towards the surface here, and we'll get a good idea of what the tornado threat's going to be like, especially over towards Iowa where the threat is highest right now. So basically, the brighter and the deeper the colors here, the stronger the threat is. So we're going to probably see this really start to emerge more so about maybe 8 or 9 o'clock Central Time. Boom, and there it is. Actually, it's going to be a little bit later than that. So this could be a pretty late stream as well on my part. Again, I find that really interesting to see these negative storm relative velocities here. I'm going to have to actually look into that more. But the fact that we're seeing that is crazy. This could also correlate to a weird storm motion too, which would be kind of interesting. Okay, with this point, the storms are out of there. The storms are very elevated, so that's a good sign. But all in all here, early in the day, I do see some potential. Early in the evening, I do see tornado potential with this. Like I said, it's not the most impressive that I've seen, but it's not zero. We're going to probably see this change a little bit throughout the course of the evening here. Also, we're not within the latest HRRR, also because we can only look out to about 18 hours. So we're going to have to probably look for another model run to come in probably a little bit after about 9 o'clock my time. So I wanted to make sure I get this video out to you guys. As far as bulk shear is concerned for this region, I'm not so concerned, considering the fact that there's not much of a tornado threat here. Again, it's not zero, but if the bulk shear isn't quite as impressive over towards Iowa where the threat is greatest, I wouldn't be so concerned to this region right here. Nonetheless, there's still plenty of bulk shear, but there's not going to be much rotation with these. Still see the probability of severe, and this is where we can start to expect that bow echo to kick in by this point and at this time. It's also overnight too, so make sure if you happen to be watching this in this area, make sure you're getting your watch. Make sure you're able to get your watches and warnings. Make sure you may have a way to be woken up in the middle of the night, because the last thing you want is to have that bow echo coming in, because it'll hit just like a tornado in a way. When you get up to about 70 plus mile per hour winds, that is pretty much the same as weak tornado, but just on a larger scale. Speaking of tornado parameters, let's go ahead and take a look at that really quick on both ends. And then I guess we'll go ahead and cover the composite reflectivity, so that way you know what everything looks like before we get out of here. Okay, so this is the early morning hours here. This is a little bit past where we are right now. Like I said, I don't expect really high numbers today. Yesterday had much higher numbers, but again, threat isn't zero. Here's some of the highest numbers we've seen, and we'll probably see a sounding from this. Again, not anything crazy right now. Plenty of cape though. But Iowa's going to be a hot spot to watch. And then once we see that squall line develop, probably our attention is going to develop more so towards that area. And you can even see with the, that's interesting for tomorrow. Could see some higher numbers for tomorrow there. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But I couldn't resist looking at it. I'm keeping an extra close eye on that. Oh man, just couldn't resist looking at that one. That was heading towards Monday. We're gonna go ahead and actually look off to the east now. Interestingly enough, if there wasn't a cap in place, I'd be even more concerned about tornadoes early this morning over here towards this region. But because of that cap, I don't see too much issue as of right now. Interestingly enough, though, there is a little pocket over here towards Illinois where there is slightly higher parameters. I do want to take a look at that as well. Plenty of cape here, and there's not much of a cap to stop it, so we could see a little bit of early activity over here towards this region. I may go ahead and take a look at that. It might be worth live streaming early and then coming back for a second round, but we'll have to see what happens. All I know is we're on the fringe of what could be a very active and very memorable day. But notice once we get later into the day, the tornado parameters actually kind of drop off a bit. There's still a threat for some, but it's going to be relatively minimal compared to what we saw yesterday. This is probably going to be from that bow echo right here. You can actually kind of see it just based off this hordeograph here. This little red area indicates the low-level winds. Mid-level winds are in the green, and higher-level winds are to the yellow and blue. And you can see that little backward C shape. You're going to see what I'm talking about in just a second if you stick around and look at the composite reflectivity here. But even so, with the amount of cape available and just enough upper level kinematics here, there's still the threat for a couple embedded tornadoes here. There's a sneaky little area right here over towards Kentucky and Tennessee that needs to be watched too. I do think that's mostly going to be inhibited by a cap. Actually, no, it's not. Oh boy. These latest soundings are interesting. All right. So after looking at all of this, of course, we know what happens tomorrow, and we're going to be discussing that a bit more. That being said, let's go ahead and finally take a look at composite reflectivity here. All right, now we're looking at the composite reflectivity. Still other stuff to look at just after this video here too for tomorrow, because I'm seeing some concerning looks off of there. I just woke up and then started doing this video too, so I'm almost in a reactive kind of mode as far as this is concerned. By 21Z, which would be about, I would say, 2-3 o'clock, right around this region, when we could start to see storms starting to fire in Nebraska. I can't think straight. It's been over a 20-minute video already. And by the time we get late into the evening, here comes the supercell threat across parts of Iowa here. And then we're starting to see the early inklings of that squall line developing here. And it really starts to mature by the time we get late into the evening and overnight hours. So it could be a super duper long stream. But we're going to go ahead and jump forward here. And interestingly enough, we do see a couple of supercells trying to form over here towards southern Illinois. That has to be watched. And then over towards this region, a few supercells try to develop here just on the fringes of this little MCS that was from yesterday's storms. So we see a couple of these starting to look like they're trying to really congeal into something significant. And then just as quickly as those leave, here comes another round. And then here comes the main squall line further off to the north here. And this extends and then comes down towards southern Illinois again. So we could be seeing a long duration severe potential across southern Illinois pretty much the entire day. You could see maybe up to 3 rounds. And then, of course, tomorrow we have to look towards this region again for severe as well. And all hazards being possible with that. And finally, it wouldn't be until about Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon when it's all said and done. But we still have to also keep an eye on the threat for flooding, where over the next 36 hours, we could see about 2 to 4 inches of rain, particularly across Illinois with these storms coming through and multiple rounds of it. So again, don't only stay weather aware for tornadoes, but also stay weather aware for the threat of flooding. because this is going to be a multi-round event. It's going to be moving through quickly, especially once we start to get that bow echo starting to develop. I think there's a pretty good chance that a bow echo develops tonight. It's not 100%, but I would say it's about maybe 75, 80%. That's about as much confidence that I have in that for right now. But again, it's something that we have to be very vigilant of. That being said, that's the end of this video over here. I know it's been a long one. If you watched to the end, I greatly appreciate you. Again, let's shred the algorithm here. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that share button, help me get this word out to people, because it could be another long day of severe weather again today, and there's a very active stretch on the way. So let's let the people know. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Appreciate you all for being here, and I'll be seeing you soon later today. It's been Tired Metalhead Weatherman. Until then, take care.